Greetings class, this is your first lesson on how to make a project, your first project with the EUDAX electronic motor kit. Alright, everything you see on this table is what you're going to need for this project, and we're going to go through it step by step. First, you have your red and black wire, then you've got your shrink tube here. You're going to need a lighter, that's not included in the kit. If you don't have a lighter, you might be able to use a hair dryer, but you're really going to need a lighter for this, so go ahead and get yourself a lighter. You're also going to need a pair of scissors. You're going to need one motor. You're going to need your connector for your battery. Now this is with the red motor kit. If you have a black motor, that's fine. It's just instead of using the 9-volt battery and the 9-volt battery adapter, you're going to use one of these, a AA adapter. I'm going to use the 9-volt for the purposes of this project, but they work exactly the same. Okay, and you're going to need your propeller, you're going to need a switch, and if you got the red back batteries, you're going to use a 9-volt. If you've got the black back batteries, you're going to use 2 AA batteries. And last but not least, I just have this manual here. Now it's important, if you take a look at this manual, you see that this is a short circuit, and you never want to short circuit electronics, because what a short circuit is with electronics is basically you have the positive and the negative side of a battery directly connected, and what will happen is you'll have electricity running through the wire that is connecting your battery, and when that happens, the electricity is going to keep flowing and flowing and flowing with no resistance, and your wire will heat up, and you can potentially start a fire that way. So be careful to never do these two type of things. That's a short circuit. This is a correct circuit diagram, and that's exactly what I'm going to show you how to do today. So this circuit diagram is the simplest circuit we can really make: battery, switch, and motor. And the only thing different that we're going to do is we're going to add a propeller to the end of it. Okay, so that's the end of the introduction. Let's move on to our first step. Okay, so the first step here is going to be stripping a wire. So we're going to learn how to strip a wire today, and in order to strip a wire, we're going to need a pair of scissors and our wire strippers. I'm going to zoom out a little bit. Now, before I zoom out, you see that we've got this lead on the wire here, and it's a very tiny lead. Now, we want to connect this wire to this switch. Oh, sorry, getting in focus here. So you want to connect the wire to the switch, but if we just have this tiny little piece of metal, it's not going to give us enough space to wrap that around the switch. Okay, and if we can't wrap it around that switch lead, then it's just going to come right off. So we need to strip some wire off of there in order to get it to work effectively, if that makes sense. And hopefully it does. Okay, so we've got to strip the end of this wire off. Now, this is a part where you're going to need some parental supervision. And the reason why you need parental supervision is because you're using scissors and you're going to be close to your fingers. Okay, so just be very careful. Parents, this is the kind of thing, help your children get through this activity once. At the end of the day, it's really not very dangerous. You just have to make sure that you can do it effectively and correctly. And so the method of stripping scissors, by the way, if you have wire strippers at your house, this is a much easier process. This is just the way that you can do it with a pair of scissors, and I'm doing it this way because most people have scissors. So the way you're going to do it is you're going to kind of keep your scissors half open. Now you're not going to put your fingers here, because if you do that, chances are you're going to close it, and then guess what's going to happen? Instead of stripping this wire, you're actually just going to cut it. So you don't want to cut the wire, you just want to strip it so you reveal more of that bare metal. So what you're going to do is you put it in that bit right here, so just right there, and then you want to press down and then pull the wire. And if you do it correctly, what's going to happen is, if you zoom in there, let's see if I can get that to focus. Alright, if you do it correctly, you're going to strip a little bit of it off, and then you can kind of pull, and the rest of it will come off. Now, you see, I revealed a little bit, so now I'm going to go ahead and I can cut the rest of this plastic off, obviously being careful. The last thing I want to do is cut the metal. Okay, so I just cut that plastic sheathing off, and boom. Now as you can see, I have stripped that metal. So that's nice, because that's exactly what I wanted. As you can see now, if I just kind of set that down, you see this lead of this black wire is much shorter than that lead, which is nice because now I can take that and wrap it around inside of that hole, inside of that switch. Okay, so you're gonna, this switch here has got a hole in it, and each one of those holes is where you're gonna stick the wire through. Okay, so you're gonna stick it through, then you're gonna twist it, and I'll show you the process. But first, before we do that, we've got to learn a little bit about heat, the shrink wrap. Okay, so I'm going to pause this now and pick back up with my shrink tube. Okay, the next step is using the shrink tube. Okay, and we have to learn how to use this correctly, and we have to learn how to think ahead. Alright, so this shrink tube is what seals the wire basically to whatever it is that you're connecting it to. It stops it from coming off, and it also shields it. So this shielding, this red and this black shielding, protects that metal and also prevents the electricity from leaking out basically, which in other words means shocking you or potentially starting a fire. So shielding is very important whenever we're working with electronics. We don't want to have any exposed wire, and we want to prevent exposed wire as much as we possibly can. So now this is exactly what this does. Now you don't have that much of this this shrink tube, so you really want to use it sparingly. Okay, so whoops, so you never want to use more than like 3/4 of an inch at a time. Alright, so how do we use this? Well, I'm going to go ahead and snip off about 3/4 of an inch, and for reference it's like up to your first knuckle maybe on your thumb or something like that, but just a little bit. You really don't need to use a lot of this for each purpose. Okay, so even that might have been too much. Okay, but it's alright. Now, what I'm going to do is I want to wrap this wire around one of these holes, wrap it through, and twist it and tie it. But if I twist it and tie it first, before I put the shrink tube on there, then guess what? I'm not going to be able to get that shrink tube on there because it's already connected and I can't fit it over the switch. So I got to think ahead, and I go ahead and put that shrink tube on this wire first. So if that makes sense, boom. It's now on the wire. It's waiting on your battery connector here. Okay, so now that I've got that done, I go ahead, try and zoom as much as I can, and I'm going to go ahead and put this through one of the holes, like that, and then bend it over, and then boom. Oops. Out of focus, out of focus. Come on. Alright. Boom. Alright. Now I'm twisting that, and as I'm twisting that around, it's getting nice and connected. Okay? So as I can see there, it's not going anywhere now. So I twisted, I've put it through, folded it back, and twisted it around. It's not going anywhere now. Now, what I need to do is go ahead and put this on manual focus so I stop losing my focus. Alright, now check it out. Boom. This is how it's gonna work, okay? So I have the shrink tube, it's gonna go over this, and the idea is it's gonna suction onto it. But the first thing, in order to get it to do that, you've got to heat it up, okay? And so that's where my lighter comes in handy. Alright, so now here's the process. I'm going to use my lighter, okay, and again, this is clearly a parental supervision moment. So I'm actually going to pause the video and pick back up in a second. Okay, so this is clearly a parental supervision moment because we're using a lighter. Now, anytime we're using fire, the first thing that we have to make sure of is that there's nothing flammable around. Now I'm working on a wood surface, but you'll notice that it's completely clear. I've got my scissors here, but I don't have any books around, no papers around. That's very important. Anytime you're using fire for any project, you have to make sure that there's nothing flammable that's gonna catch on fire anywhere near you. Okay, that doesn't mean, oh, it's pushed to the side. It doesn't mean, oh, it's just over there. No, it means you've got a clear surface that's completely free of anything flammable, because the last thing that you want is while you're building this project for something to catch on fire. obviously. So first thing is make sure your surface is clear. The second thing is this is a nice safety lighter, so it's not going to stay lit. Also, it kind of requires a little bit of force here, so there's no way I'm gonna accidentally light this lighter. Now, you might just have a regular lighter, you might be using matches. If you don't have a lighter, and then this shrink tube's gonna be hard for you to get on there solid, but it's totally okay. Look, if you don't have a lighter, you can literally just take this shrink tube and then put a little bit of Scotch tape around there, and then that'll be okay. It's not the end of the world if you just tape that on with Scotch tape. Also, this entire process can completely be replaced by electrical wire. So if you have electric tape, the black tape, you can just, instead of using the shrink tube, you can just use electrical tape. Okay, so I'm gonna go ahead assuming that you have a lighter. All right, now how is this process gonna work? What are you gonna do? All right, well, here's the idea. What you're gonna do in this process is you're gonna use the lighter to basically heat the shrink tube. Now, you want to keep your fingers away from the wire, but it is a little bit of a tricky process because you can't just kind of move your fingers completely because you got to hold it on there. The last thing that you want is for your shrink tube to be here, and then you heat it and it shrinks and then you're done. Okay, so you want to keep it here in the very beginning. Now, the key of doing this process is you don't want to just hold your lighter underneath the thing for a long time and just like burn it, because it will catch on fire. If you have a heat gun, that's gonna work perfectly. I'm assuming most people don't have heat guns, but if you have a heat gun, you'll use that, no risk of catching on fire, and you can hold it on there as long as you need, okay? But assuming you've got a lighter, I'm moving forward. Now, you don't wanna just hold the flame underneath the same part over and over. You literally just wanna touch it with the flame. Now, you can hold it far below the flame, the flame far below the piece, and it's gonna take a long time for it to shrink, and also it's gonna probably burn your fingers. So you don't wanna do that. You just wanna be really quick with the flame and just pass it right underneath and then watch. So I passed it, boom, and it did the trick, okay? So you see how quick that was? It was super fast and I'm done, okay? But now, I just shrunk that part, but I want to shrink the other part too. But I want to get my fingers out of the way, obviously, because I don't want to burn my fingers. So I just hold it from this part now, and then boom. Sorry, I hit that part now, just very quickly on both sides. And there you go. I'm done. Now, resist the urge to pinch it right after you've hit it with the flame. It's gonna be hot, you might get burned. So you can wait a little bit and then pinch it, and then it'll be on nice and tight, but the point is this: the flame does the trick, the tube shrinks, there's no real need to pinch it. All right, and so that's it, okay? And that's how you're gonna keep doing this every single time. So I'm not gonna explain every single time how to use the shrink tube, you're just gonna see me walk through the process, and I'm gonna do it as quickly as I can, so this video isn't super long. All right, so that's now connected, cool. So if I take a look there, and I get everything in focus, boom, I now have my battery connected, connected to the switch. All right, cool. So I'm gonna pause this now, pick back up in the next step. Okay, the next step here is I'm gonna take a piece of wire and I'm going to connect it to the other lead on the switch, okay? So now you can see that this wire is a bit long, and I really don't need it to be that long. I kind of need just half the wire, so I'm just gonna kind of take it and cut it in half. So first step here is cut this wire in half. All right, listen, we don't need to waste resources, right? Okay, so now that I've got this wire cut in half, I'm gonna go ahead and strip the wire in exactly the same way that I showed you before, okay? So I'm gonna speed up this process in the video, God willing that works. So I'm gonna speed up this process, but it's the exact same thing, all right? So all I'm doing is I'm stripping both sides of this red wire. All right, so take a look. Okay, So as you can see here, I finished stripping my wire, and if you were watching that video carefully, you saw that I actually messed up once, and that's totally okay. Look, you're gonna mess up, you're gonna make mistakes. It's totally fine. Look, if you end up messing up an incomplete wire, just start again, okay? The point is that I ended up with two nice leads on the ends of the wires, and I can go ahead and twist them up to get rid of any weird stray wires that are kind of hanging out there a little bit. I twist them up, and I'm good to go. Cool, so that's that step. I'm gonna continue, I'm gonna pause now and continue to the next step. Okay, the next step here is I'm gonna take my wire and I'm gonna go ahead and loop it through and twist it around just like I did the last time. Okay, so I'm gonna go ahead and loop it through there, loop it through the hole, and then I'm gonna bend it over. Now I've got that nice and bent, and then I'm just gonna go ahead and twist it. Oh, lost my grip there. So, gotta bend it over again. And then go ahead and twist it. So twisting this wire ends up with you having it nice and solidly connected. Okay, if you don't twist it, even with the shrink tube, it can still come off. So you want to twist it enough so that if you pull on it, it's not going to go anywhere. Okay, so now that I've got that on, I want to do the same thing with my shrink tube as I did before. So I'm going to take this shrink tube and I'm going to go ahead and cut off a little piece. There you go. And now I'm going to slide it down the wire. And boom. Okay, so again, this is a parental supervision bit because you're going to be using fire. Go ahead and pass the flame under just quickly, and then you can see that it already did it just that quick little bit. And notice I was shaking the lighter back and forth a little bit. That keeps it from burning anything. Okay, and then again I want to do this side to finish it off. So let me get a nice focus, and then boom. That's it. That's as long as it takes. And remember, resist the urge. I always have the urge to pinch it right after, but don't do that. You're going to burn yourself, okay? So resist the urge to pinch it right afterwards. Then, after a little while, go ahead and pinch it. Make sure it's on there really nice. Alright, so cool. With that being said, now I am done. I've got my both red wires attached. One of them is on the battery. The other one is just hanging out loose, and that one is going to be the one that goes to the motor. Cool. So I'm going to pause it here and I'm going to pick up in the next step. Okay, so for this next step, I've got this is my lead coming off my battery connector, and again I want to strip this off. Okay, so I got to strip that lead to make sure it's nice and longer in order to make sure I've got enough room. I'm going to try my best not to cut it this time. And once you kind of get it, you can usually get it with your nails. If you don't have nails, then tough luck. You find someone who does. Okay, so now I've got both of these leads good. Remember, I've got my two reds that are coming out of my switch, and then I've got the red and black coming out of the battery connector, and now I've got these two loose ends, and those are going to be what I attach to the motor. Okay, so now that I've got that stripped, I'm going to pause for a sec, or actually here, I'm just going to go ahead and grab it. Here's my motor, and here are my wires. Now it's pretty simple. You've got one wire that's going to go to one side of the motor and another wire that's going to go to the other side. You notice that I've got these two copper connectors here, and those are going to be what leads that electricity to the motor, and those are the leads for your electric motor. This is a DC motor, which means direct current coming straight from the battery. And so it's a simple electric motor, and all we have to do is connect a battery to it, and we can get it going. Now, the first thing I want to check is if my switch is on or off. So I just very carefully touch. Okay, cool. So if it doesn't start going, that means my switch is off. But if I switch it now, if I switch it and then touch it very carefully. Oh, of course I forgot that I don't have a battery connected, so that's not going to work. So I'm going to go ahead and connect my battery. Whoops. Alright, so I'm going to go ahead and switch it back the other way because I'm pretty sure they start as being off. So now I've got a battery connected. Oh, see it jumping? Boom, that means my switch is on. Okay, and then cool, my switch is off. Now, usually I don't want to be hooking up any electronics with the battery connected, but now I know my switch is off. I disconnect my battery, and I'm good to go. Okay, so now the first thing that I want to do is talk to you about the polarity of a motor, or rather not the polarity of a motor, but the polarity of a battery. So a battery has a positive and a negative side. So what that means is that in a battery, electricity actually flows out of one side and flows back into the other side. Now, it's not too important to talk about exactly what that which side is which, but the point is that you have current, and current flows in a direction. So what does that mean for you in terms of your battery and in terms of your motor? Well, if you hook up the positive side to one part of your motor and the negative side to the other, then the current from the battery is going to flow through the wire, go into the motor, start the motor turning, and flow out of the motor into the negative side of the battery. Cool. Now, with that established, okay, the question is, what does it change if, for instance, I hook the positive side to the other side of the motor versus the negative? Well, what will happen is, because the electricity is flowing in the other direction, your motor will spin in the opposite direction. So what that tells us is the leads that we connect to either side actually matters. Okay, so it's not arbitrary. This motor will go in one direction depending upon which side, whether the positive or the negative, you connect to which one of these leads. So why does that matter? Well, look, if I've got a fan and I want that fan to blow so it pushes air out at me, well, guess what? It's got to spin in the right direction. If I have it spinning in the opposite direction, it's actually going to suck air in, and the fan is going to be spinning in the way that I don't want it to spin. So the question is, how do I determine that? Well, depending upon your motor, it's kind of trial and error. So I've already connected one, and this is what I found. For these red motors, if I've got the negative going into this part, and the positive going into this part, if I'm holding my motor like this, that's going to get my fan to spin in the correct direction. All right, so that's how we're going to do it. We're going to connect negative here and positive here. All right, so negative here and positive here. All right, so I'm going to pause it now, and I'm going to pick back up in just a second. Okay, so now we're going to start connecting. We're going to connect these wires to the motor, and I'm making sure that my battery's not connected so it doesn't start moving while I'm trying to connect it. Now, this is where forethought comes in. Again, if I connect these leads to the motor, that's not going to help me out very much, because guess what? I'm going to want to put shrink wrap on there, the shrink tube on there, and it's already going to be connected, so I will not be able to put it on because it's already connected. So what I need to do before I actually go ahead and connect the wires to the motor is I'm going to go ahead and cut 2 pieces of my shrink tube. Okay, and with that, I'm now going to actually put that on the wire. So I'm going to put that on this wire here, and I'm going to put that on this wire here. So this is that thinking ahead bit that helps you to not have to do work multiple times. Okay. So now, if you remember, I've got to put my negative, my black here, and my positive, my red there. All right, cool. So I'm going to go ahead and connect those. Now, you connect them in the exact same way as you did previously, where you're going ahead. Here, I'm going to zoom in a little bit to make it a little easier to see. So I'm going to connect my negative here. So all I have to do is go ahead and put that wire through that hole there, and then bend it over and twist. Now be careful when you're twisting this, because those copper leads on the motor are actually pretty flexible. So you want to be aware that you're not actually bending those copper leads too much. These ones right here on the actual motor, because those can get twisted up pretty significantly. All right, and that's not what we want. But we do want to bend those out a little bit, actually. We want to bend them out just a little bit. Makes it easier for us. So I'm going to go ahead and bend this one out too, just a little bit. Again, don't bend it too much, because then it's going to break, okay? So just bend it out just a little bit. And then we're going to connect our red, making sure that we've already got our shrink tube on that wire. And then notice how my wire is frayed at the end. It was just frayed at the end there. So I can just go ahead and twist that to make sure it's not frayed. And then boom, put my shrink tube on there. And then cool. Now I'm gonna go ahead and connect this the exact same way I connected the other one. So I'm gonna put it through. I'm then gonna bend it over. Oh. So my wire is frayed, and there you go. That's a perfect example. If your wire is frayed, it's going to give you a hard time in actually putting it through that hole there. So you want to make sure your wire is not frayed. I'm going to untwist this because it just got twisted. All right, and there we go. So now my wire is flat or nice and put together. Should be able to put this through the hole here without any issue. Oh. There you go. Okay. Once it's through, I bend it over and then just go ahead and give it a couple twists. And there you go. I've got my black and my red leads on there nicely, as you can see. Good to go. All right, so the next step is the shrink tube. I'm going to pause it and I'm going to come back. Okay, so last step here, we're going to go ahead and put that shrink tube. Now the shrink tube is actually the hardest with the motor because the leads are a little bit different. So don't fret if it doesn't work as well as on the other ones. Just do the best that you can. Again, parental supervision because we're using fire. We're going to go ahead and just pass that lighter through there. So it melts it around there. And then once that's melted on, I'm going to move my fingers a little bit, give myself some room, and then melt the other side. Boom. And as you can see, it's just a little bit of time. You don't need it on there a long time, and just resist the urge to pinch it immediately. After 2 seconds it'll be cool enough, but just don't pinch it immediately because it will still be hot. Then we're going to go ahead and do the other side as well. So I've got my shrink tube here. Start by pressing it up firmly against that lead, and then go ahead and pass the lighter underneath it very quickly, and you can see that shrunk nice. And then I'm going to go ahead and just move my fingers so I don't get burned, and then do the same thing on the other side. Awesome. So don't be afraid if a little bit of smoke comes up. That's okay. Alright, so now I have basically accomplished my circuit. So you'll notice that this is almost exactly the circuit. I just made it a little bit simpler. This is almost exactly the circuit that you have in this little tiny user manual, which is just 3 pictures, but yeah. So it's almost the exact same circuit as that, which is, as I said, about as simple as it comes. All right, so now I'm gonna pause it here because this circuit's done. I've got my red positive connected to the switch, also connected to the motor. Then I've got the negative connected directly to the motor. And then as soon as I come back, I'm going to put this battery on and I'm going to test it just to make sure the motor's running. So I'm pausing and I'll be back in a sec. Alright, so we're back, and the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to connect my motor, and God willing, I made sure it was off before so it's not going to just jump on me. But boom. So I connected that, nice. And now that it's connected, sweet, it didn't just immediately start, because that's the last thing you want, is just a motor starting without you being ready. I'm gonna go ahead and hit that switch. And sweet, that's the sound of victory. Awesome. So that means I've done everything correctly, okay? So very cool. Now if you've been following along with this video and you've done everything correctly, awesome. But if you're just watching this video for the first time, and you haven't begun yet, let me just be very clear about something. The last thing that you want to do is create a short circuit, just like I said in the very beginning. You need to make sure that there's never a situation where you've just got a wire that goes straight to something and then back right into the battery. You see, if the way that this circuit is actually, it goes from the positive of the battery into the switch, then into the motor, then back into the battery. So this motor is in between the positive and the negative terminals of the battery, which is exactly what I want, because that motor provides that resistance that ends up decreasing the amount of current inside of that's flowing through the wires. And by decreasing the current, it actually decreases the temperature, the heat that wire is going to experience. Now, if you don't have that resistance of that motor in between the positive and the negative side terminals of a battery, you're going to have no resistance, you're going to have a very high current, and you're going to end up with the wire overheating and potentially starting a fire. So if you are watching this for the first time, make sure that your circuit is like this. You never want to connect a wire directly from the positive to the negative sides of a battery. All right, now that's that. The next step is going to be connecting the propeller. I'm going to pause and I'll be back in a sec. Alright, so here's the last step, which is arguably the easiest step. I'm just going to go ahead and take my propeller and connect it onto the battery. So it's really, the motor. So as you can see, I've got this hole there. That hole is perfectly sized to fit on that shaft. And so all you have to do is just press it on. And there you go. Now, once you've done that, you're done. That is the end of the first project. But let me just give you some safety tips. First off, you see how I've got my fan resting on the table? If I go ahead and turn this switch on right now, what do you think is going to happen? That fan's going to move, and yeah, that's not going to be fun because it's just going to fly all over the place because it's going to hit against the table. So I don't want to just hit that switch just being super excited. I want to hold it correctly and then turn the switch on. And if you've made everything correctly, this is going to be pretty robust. So you're going to be able to move it around and it's not going to come out. That's what that shrink tube is for. Okay, so hold it. Make sure you don't hold it where the fan blades are going to hit your hands, because that's not going to be fun. Now, this motor is not super powerful. This is plastic. So I've gotten hit by it a couple of times because I did the things that I'm telling you not to do. And it didn't cut me. It didn't really hurt at all. It just kind of like stung for a second and then that was it. So it's not that dangerous, but with that being said, it is going to spin super fast and you do want to be careful. So one of the things that I recommend for sure before you actually test this out is if you have sunglasses or regular glasses or any kind of eye protection, before you test out anything that's going to be spinning at high velocity, is generally a good idea to put on some eye protection first. So before you test anything, go ahead and put on some eye protection. All right. I'm going to assume you just put on some eye protection, you pause the video, now you're back, and we're going to go ahead and test this. So hold it in your hand, making sure that your fingers and your arms or everything else is clear of the fan blade. and you go ahead, grab the switch with the other hand and turn it on. And there you go. How cool is that? So, oh, see? I hit the fan blade, not fun. So cool, there you go. You can see the fan is blowing my little paper, which is fun. And that's it. That's the first project. Oh, careful. See? Told you. Be careful. Like, as you saw, I touched the fan blade, not a big deal. It hit the wire, not a big deal. It's plastic. It's not that powerful. It's just a 9-volt battery. And to be clear, just in case you've been watching this whole thing and saying, oh, but I don't have the 9-volt battery, this has literally been the exact same process, except for if you have the AA batteries, except with a AA battery, instead of this being a 9-volt battery, you'll have this case here, and you just have to make sure you put your AA batteries there. And you might notice this interesting thing here. It's like, whoa, what is that? Is that like a little kung fu chop thing? No. What that does is connects the two batteries together. So if this is open like this, all you're gonna have is the power of if you have this open, that actually opens the circuit, and so this actually acts as a switch in and of itself. So if you have it open, it's going to disconnect your circuit, and it's like basically like you disconnected a wire from the battery. So that's what that does. But when you close it like this, it connects the two batteries together, the negative and the positive terminals, and you've got a working circuit. So make sure this is closed, and you've got your positive and your negative wires hooked up exactly the same way as I did with the 9-volt battery. All right, with that being said, that is the end of the project. Good job. Send me a picture when you're done. It should be something like this where I can see all the wires connected correctly. And if you want, you can go ahead and share a video with me too. Be safe, be careful, have fun. Till next time, enjoy robotics.